Hello, hello. I hope we are live. Yep, we are live. I can see. Yep, guys, hello in the chat so that we know we are live. Okay. Sure. Okay, cool. I think it's good. I can see the timer running. I can see people. Okay. Hey guys, welcome back. This is not one of our product and design series episode, but you're going to love it equally. As you know, UX design is amongst top 5 careers in 2022. I'm not saying it. LinkedIn did it in one of their recent reports. And it makes sense as the number of digital products is in the today's market is increasing exponentially. But a lot of you who are starting out must have a tons of questions, right, around how to get a job and what skills are important and things like that. But do stick around till the end. We have a now or never announcement for you, and you would not want to miss that. In this session, we are going to discuss what skills are important as a UX designer, how to prepare for applying to a UX design job, what are recruiters looking for when they are looking at your portfolio and when they are inviting you in for an interview, and much more. And who better to share the learnings from his experience than the man who has seen it all, starting from Goibibo, Flipkart, Myntra, and now building Nextly. The man who mostly stands out in a crowd, not just because of his experience in design, but because of his ever-changing hair color. Mostly, his borderline controversial, sometimes controversial, and he's none other than Neel Raj. So let me invite Neel with me on stage. Hi Neel, how are you
Hey,
doing?
hi, I'm good. How are you?
Great, man. I look forward to having a great chat with you. I was super excited for this one because this is something that we haven't done on the channel. We this is when we started the first one was with Udit, which he's a friend from Zomato and he heads the product over there. And we did the first one then, and now it's with you. I'm super excited for this.
Sure, I am as well. I have not done this in a while, so I may be a little bit rusty. So please, bear with me on that.
No worries, all of us. It's a Sunday. We are here, and we just want to learn from your experience. So let's start with a very tell us a little bit about your journey into design, and how you started your journey.
So I believe I started somewhere around in college, probably around second year. I was introduced to something called Photoshop, which I had no idea about. And earlier, I used to only edit pictures, and that's how I got started to understand the tools. I was not really sure if that was a career that I wanted to take, but during my days, I was also a participant in the Google Developers Group, where I met someone who used to head the local chapter as well. That person was a designer, and he introduced me to this side of the world where I already knew most of the basic tools that would be required. So he kind of pushed me into trying this out, and that's how I got started.
So it's very similar to something I think how I got started, and that was one of my friends introduced me to this crazy tool, which was Photoshop back then, and then we started contributing to Google Developers Group, which New Delhi chapter, right? I think that's where we also started. And that's when later I started to transition into design more. So I was a developer earlier and used to develop small websites and things like that, but that's how I also got started. Crazy. So Neil, you have worked with some of the biggest e-commerce companies in India, if we talk about Flipkart, if we talk about Myntra, if we talk about Goibibo. I consider Goibibo also as a e-commerce sort of platform.
Yeah,
So
anything that's selling anything online is e-commerce in the way.
Absolutely, I do agree with that. So, like over the years, what like what sort of transition in terms of design skills have you seen happening? Like when you started out, then what was the table stakes, and now what are the table stakes for a designer?
So I think when I had started out, there were not a lot of people who were actually in the design community. So the community was quite smaller. And at that point, since more and more companies had started realizing the value that design can bring onto them, it was more about problem solving. It was a lot more focused on problem solving. A lot of companies were not really pushing the boundaries in terms of visual design and interaction design as such. There were a few, and there still continue to be those players, but those numbers have started going up. A lot of people
Sure.
now have got the basic understanding that designers are essentially problem solvers. So when it comes to the basic skill set that you bring on the table, the bar has become a lot higher. So it's not it was easy. I would say it was really easy for us to get that start than it is today. So I am lucky that way, if you can say that. But yeah,
Mm,
it's become a lot more difficult right now because competition is much higher. There are a lot more people looking for roles than there are roles now. In my time, that was the opposite. There were roles, there were not enough people to fill those roles.
sure, sure. Yeah. So, like continuing on the same path about skills, let me ask you this: what are, if you can point out like three core skills that someone who wants to get started in UX or who is transitioning into UX should have? And like when he's transitioning or starting his career, he's starting as a PD1 or UX designer one role at a company. What are the like top three skills according to you that a person should have?
So I have a little different view on it. I don't see it as top three skills.
Sure.
If you have to get started, you just pick one and you focus a lot more on getting really good at it. What happens when we hire junior designers is that we're not looking for someone who knows everything, because then you would not really be a junior designer per se. We're basically looking at the skill sets that the company would appreciate, and if you bring that on the table, it'll be a very much valuable addition. But apart from that, we hope that you learn the rest of the things inside the job. So primary thing would continue to be attitude, and basically one skill that can add value to that company and which you invest a lot. It could be problem solving, it could be visual design, it could be interaction design, it could be anything. You don't need to know all of them to begin your career with. You just need to know one, and you learn the rest during the way based on what interests you.
Sure. So, like, at this point of time, I would want to ask you because it's a serious question that I have been asking myself quite a lot. That let's suppose when we say that a person needs to focus on one core skill, how does a person who is trying to apply in a company know that what a company is looking for at any given point of time? I'm sitting outside, I don't know at this point of time what Apple is looking for, right?
Mhm.
What do they need? Like you talked about very specific skill. I don't know, right? So like if you can shed some light on that, how would you go about it? But that would be helpful, I think.
Sure. So there's a lot of it would require some groundwork from your end. If you're specifically targeting one company or a couple of companies, what you would ideally want, if you specifically want to pitch yourself to them, is to figure out what they basically are lacking. And you might get that from observing the products and the updates that they're pushing out. There are obviously a lot of conversations happening about each company's products on Twitter as well right now. You can also reach out to members of their team and try and understand from them. Those will help you understand some of the things that they might want. And if that aligns with what you're trying to build for yourself, the skill set that you're trying to get better at, then you should start applying for that company. It takes time, it takes a lot of groundwork, so you would have to focus a lot more on that.
So, like, what you're essentially talking about, stalking the company a little bit by, like,
Yeah.
stalking the people who are working in that company, like, looking forward to their updates, and like, engaging with the people who are already in that organization, and that's
Yeah.
how you can actually start learning about what are the, like, positions that are open in that company, or what are the skills they are lacking, or where they could use some help.
Yeah, it's like most opportunities are often created by conversations that you have with people. I'm uh, like, if you're, especially if you're applying at a big organization, because the number of applications that come in are usually overwhelming, where the number of positions that are open may not be. So when you have to sort through the applications, you need something which is more than just the resume that's there. I know it's a lot to ask, but that's what the scene is right now. Because as I said before, the number of roles and the number of people applying, especially junior roles, because recently we've seen a lot of people trying to transition into UX design, but there aren't as many roles as they have been created for them. So it becomes a little difficult. And it's also something that I've seen is people are very selective nowadays onto where they want to start their journey at, which I believe is a little overrated. It doesn't really matter what company you start your first job at, it's what you learn there and how you apply those to find your next step in your journey. The first step is often quite overrated, as to like finding that first job should be in a perfect company to actually get yourself everything that you want from that organization. It's highly overrated.
Okay. So, like, this is something that not a lot of people talk about, and I think yesterday only, I think you were there on the Twitter Spaces
Yeah.
stream as well, and someone mentioned that he has six offers, and like, he doesn't know how to go about choosing one. And I personally feel that's a overkill, or like something that you should not be doing. Why do you have six offers? Why did you apply in so many companies, right? Like, do you so there is a lack of focus, I think. Like, people don't know how or where they are good at, or where they can create value. So
Mhm.
some, like, do you have some idea about how can someone focus and nail down on, this is what I'm good at, this is the kind of role that would suit best according to the likings, like, my likings, and where I can create value?
See, it's a little difficult to judge that before you've even started working in that role. So if you have like multiple offers from different companies, that's great. But what you should do is just take your gut feeling and start at whichever company you want at that point of time. Don't try to weigh in too much on the pros and cons on what that company would do for you, because if you don't do the work inside the company, it does not really matter what company you go to. Doesn't matter if you're at Google or Flipkart or Facebook or any of the others. If you don't really do the work inside that organization, that brand name will not take you so far.
Absolutely.
So
I
you
think
should not worry too much on like what you want to do before you've actually started going through the rounds. You don't really know how Google's design team works. Even though you've got a job there, once you start there, you'll spend a couple of months trying to understand how the business work, how the products work, and then you would start finding opportunities to contribute there. And that's the time when you actually start working and figuring out if that works for you or not.
Sure. And let me take a question from the audience. I think Kiran posted one question here. So let's take this one. So, can I solely do UI design? Why are there less UI designer job opportunities compared to UX designers?
So to be honest, you can actually do solely UI design. It's not really a matter of whether there are more opportunities compared to UX designer. UX designers are getting more opportunities. You are A lot of times what happens in a lot of startups is that they have limited resources. So they are essentially looking for people who can do both. It's not that UX designers are not expected to be good at visual design. And it's the opposite is not true as well, that visual designers are not expected in those startup environments to know some bit of UX. If you go in a lot of matured companies or companies where design teams are larger, of course there are specific roles for UI designers. And recently those roles have started coming up a lot more than it used to in the past, because now there's a lot more talent available in the market for them to hire. So you can choose to specialize in UI design going forward. I wouldn't say you should straight up decide that you only want to be a UI designer. You can explore other avenues as well, because in the beginning of your career you have a lot more time to actually figure out what you want. Right now, if you're doing it in your own time and you find something that you like, start from that. It's like nobody says that it's the same thing that you're gonna like maybe a year from now. Maybe once you start working, you discover something else which you want or like more than UI designer. Do you want to pursue that? Do that. It's not, if you're really good, then it, you can find those opportunities. There are obviously companies who are solely looking for these kinds of people. Maybe you may not find them a lot more if you're just looking at the common space, but if you start interacting with people who are more into visual design, and because people who are there present who solely focus a lot more on UI design, they are more aware of the opportunities that come in that space as well. If you group them all together, then you may not find that there are only UX product opportunities.
Absolutely. I think more so it's as you mentioned, it's about the positioning and are you at the right position at the right time or not. Like, people are talking about, I see a lot of people now talking about only design systems, and they are hosting like, more so sessions around that and things like that. And if you join one of them, you'll find a lot of people who share the same passion for visuals or UI design, and they might be able to help you over there. And absolutely, I think it's on point. So I know a little bit about this, how where you stand, but like, for the audience, where do you stand on UX design portfolios?
um, can you like pinpoint to a certain extent? Otherwise, like this can go into a complete tangent.
Absolutely. So for getting a job, right, do you think like, portfolio is important? If yes, how much so? And if someone wants to start, where should they start?
So I believe a portfolio is definitely important if you're standing, if you're just starting out. What you should focus on in the portfolio is different than what you usually see. So right now, there's a lot of focus on case studies, and you see that often. And case studies are great, but what you put inside those case studies matter a lot more than just writing the case study itself. So if you read a bunch of case studies from freshers today, what you will see is that the format is the same. Everyone talks about the same things. If you have to find like difference, if you even use a text checker or a pattern checker, you can find like 50% of them are the same. If you just replace keywords from, maybe the problem statements were different, or the mocks that they present are different. And it's not really the person's fault who has written that case study as well, because that's what they've been seeing, so that's what they're following, because they have no clue what to do. The problem that happens is when five people send me their case study portfolios, I don't really know which one is better than the other, because most of what I see there has no reflection of who you are, or what value you can bring to our team when I'm trying to go through a portfolio. So I would rather not focus too much on the problem statement that was given to you and the entire process that you followed, because while you may know the basic design process, that process keeps on changing in different environments inside the company as well. And even one design team may not always follow the same process for each project that they're tackling. So it's great that you know the process, but to this day I make that assumption that based on where you have learned your skill set, you have been made aware of what the standard process is. So you don't need to spend like a lot of time just talking about the process. I know you know. If you didn't know, you would not have arrived at the solution that you have arrived. So that is okay. I would more and more interested in the problems you faced, while arriving at the solution. And that is what, and the things you tried, the things that didn't work out, the things that worked out, both of them. And it should have good reasoning as well. So when I see people trying visual iterations of certain attributes, think about why it did not work. What I see in most case studies is one page where people show five iterations and they just say these were initial iterations, and then they just show the final one. I have no idea how you arrive from the initial to the final. And did the final one solve your problem as well? Did you test it out with people that you were designing it for, and whether you got some feedback and what changes you made? That's how the journey is. That is what makes me understand that you know what people are looking for and what this job requires, rather than just like write a case study. So a case study is great, but it's if it's not reflective of who you are, then it's not really valuable.
Absolutely. I do agree with what you're saying, that instead of, let me put it this way, instead of having a cookie cutter template of like case study, that where you start with brief, you have some images where I can't read anything. Just it's just there for the heck of it. There are
Yeah.
sticky notes. I don't know what you're talking about, and like you didn't focus on the problem that much. You just did some visual iterations and you reached a solution. I don't know how and if it even solved the problem, because in the end we designers, we keep talking about ourselves as being a problems solver in front of the in front of the design. But in the end, if I can't judge from that, how the hell do I believe that you have got what it takes to solve problem at when we get you in the organization?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Neil, I think at this point of time, I would very much like to understand. So, you have recently started hiring, and I think you follow a very unique process, which we'll get to in some time. But what are the some of the things that a candidate needs to keep in mind when they are going to interview with a company? Some tips around how to go about UX interviews.
Mm, so first things first, you should know about the company that you're applying for. You should try to look up their website and try and understand what they're doing. If it's okay if you don't completely understand that, I don't expect you to, but you should be prepared with some questions that you would ask the interviewer as well when you're talking about it. Because what happens in a lot of, and this is especially true in case of startups, is that both need to find the right fit. As much as I am interested in seeing how well you fit inside the team, you should be equally interested in seeing how the company fits in the way you want your career to progress. So when you're doing those interviews, you should come prepared as well as to what questions do you need to ask. And it's always a good sign that when you've actually put some effort and you just don't show up to the interview with just a case study and that's it. It's better to come prepared. More so, what you would also want to do is to not focus too much on what you have already written, because what you submitted as an initial submission for the application has already been seen by recruiters. Unless and until it is specifically mentioned in the interview that this is what we want to talk about and there are specific sections that we want to talk about it, uh, don't bring that too much into the conversation, because it has already been seen. You would want to cover other grounds that you might not have covered before. What interests you? What are you looking for? Maybe you have an idea of where you want your career to be 2 years down the line. Maybe you don't. Have that discussion with the recruiter or with the designer who's taking your interview. It's more about who you are as a person, and less about the hard skills that you have to offer, especially in the beginning, because you're just starting out. I'm not expecting a lot of hard skills from you anyway. That you would grow into in a lot of, like, in years. In my first job, when I had started out, the mocks that I used to make at that point of time, I knew a lot of people personally who did a much better job than I did at that point of time. And I still have a lot of friends who do a much better job than me at that point of time, but our goals are different. And our goals are different, our personalities are different, what we bring to the table are different. So when we have these conversations with interviewers, and whenever I am also sitting in an interview today, I want to bring that part out as much as possible, because then they know what kind of candidates they are actually looking at.
Hmm. Yeah, it does make sense, and as you mentioned that, uh, so if I have to summarize what you said in three key tips would be: one, research about the company and the role that you're going to, and know as much as you can about the company before you show up for the interview. Second is ask questions. So one of the things that I see most people don't do is like they don't have questions to ask the company. They are like, they are thinking that only the company is evaluating them. You have to equally
Yeah.
be evaluative of that. Do you fit in this culture? Do you understand what's going on? Do you understand what problem they are trying to solve, or what you would be working on in next 6 months and things like that. And I think and third is very being very like, uh, good as a team player, then like, having tons of hard skills, because hard skills is something that you can learn over time. But if you can't play in the team, that might be like, very difficult to difficult to learn over a long period of time.
Obviously, some of these will vary depending on like which company you're applying for and what they're expecting out of you. Obviously, if they're expecting a lot of hard skills upfront, then you it may not bode well for you to not have them. I'm not saying that you should not focus on those things. I'm just saying you should be prepared to focus on a lot more than just that. What happens in a lot of interviews, and you can obviously space these out. So, for example, if you've done some work on your portfolio and that's doing a good enough job to actually get you seen, and it's getting you to a one-on-one conversations with design teams across different companies. What you want to focus on is show the other sides of you that are not represented in that case study, so that in the 1 hour conversation that I have with you as a candidate, I get to know as much about you as possible. If I'm the one who's driving the entire 1 hour conversation, then you are putting the entire onus on me to poke you to find out. And after, if I have like 100 applicants that I have to sit on a call with, I may start with the motivation to do that, but towards the end of it, it may not go that well. If you help me do that, I'm much more interested in talking to you. I've had interviews where it was scheduled for 30 minutes, but it went on for 3 hours,
Yeah,
because
happens.
the person in front of me was so interested in like learning a bunch of things on what we do, how we do these things, how can they add value, what they would discuss with me about what they have done so far, what they observed it didn't work out for them, and what they're planning on doing about it. They're trying to understand how to go about those things, and those are more interesting. I would much rather have people like that on my team, who have that hunger to learn and better improve themselves, than one who already knows everything and then doesn't grow from there.
Absolutely. And I think when you mentioned that a conversation of 30 minutes scheduled on the calendar went on for 3 hours, it actually is about like, if I have to give an analogy, it would be like, table tennis, right? It's a conversation. It's like, two players are there, or two people are having that conversation. It's not that I don't want to play against the wall, right? Like I'm throwing and you just like, there sitting, and more so like, go always like, in an interview with the mindset of, yes, you want to impress, you want to showcase your skills, you want to show how can you add value. But it's also about having a conversation. What if you do not like this person and you're just playing along to get that role? It might not bode well with you over time, right? Like you might not enjoy working with them, right? And vice versa, right?
Yeah.
And when someone is actually, when like, someone or me evaluating a candidate, it's more so about, is this person fun to work with? It's really a criteria, right? Like if you are not fun to work with, if you're just like yes, no, over time people realize that, and you will not be able to grow as much in the organization as well. And that's what I think, um, Neil is also talking about, that more so it's a collaboration, it's a conversation, not
Yeah,
that only you are under the lens and you have to do whatever it takes to get the job.
sure.
Sure. I think, Neil, let's take one more question, and it's from Priyansh. He says, how can someone improve their skill to solve problems, or something like product thinking? For example, something like ability to intuitively identify edge cases. How can we improve these core concepts? So he's talking about, like, as we mentioned, that hard skills can be learned over time, right? And
Yeah.
one of the very important skills as a designer is product thinking, right? Like, how does this thing fit in the business, how it solves users problem, and more so on those lines. So how can one get better at it?
So, if you're working, I just want to confirm one thing before, if whether you're actually working at a job, or are you trying to do it on your own while not having a full time job?
So Priyansh, question for you: are you in a job, or are you trying to go for one, or are you planning to apply for one? If you are, if you can just put it in the chat, that would be helpful. Okay, I don't see it, but um
I can actually cover both
both.
scenarios. So,
Yeah.
if you're not really working inside an organization per se, so you'd probably be starting as a beginner designer. What you would want to do is focus on basic problem solving skills, not too much on the edge cases right up front. What you would find essentially is that when you start testing these out with other people who may not think on the same lines as you, is when you start identifying these edge cases. So you're it's basically blind spots that everyone has, and as the more you do a lot of these activities, the more like your blind spots gets reduced, and you would come to a place where you start identifying these edge cases much in a much better way. There's no one way to learn this. It's mostly experimental at this point. You can obviously like participate in problem solving jam sessions that other like clubs can host, and there are obviously books as well present on broad design problem statements that they'll help you find the solution, and they'll give you a task. You have to first build your own solution, and they'll have a solution at the end. The books even say that no two solutions are completely correct. Theirs might work in different cases, yours might work in different cases. So that would help you understand the breadth of the way that people think, and that's what will help you get rid of the blind spots that you have. It takes a long time. It's not really something that you learn in a month or so, but you'll keep getting better at it the more time you spend on it.
I hope, Priyansh, this answers your question. And I, so like, Neil and I think we both align on this thing. It's a muscle, and the more you work on it, the more you develop it. It's good to take help from books. It's good to take help from other designers and learn it. But the more you do it, the better you will be able to do it in future. And that's the way to go about it. I hope this answers your question. Tripti says, I'll just put it here. So Tripti says, "Hi, is it is okay to reject an offer based on compensation the company is offering as a fresher?"
Okay, so I I personally have not done it, but what I would suggest is to have a, a basic framework for yourself. It's not always if uh, what you would want to do is have a few parameters when you look at a role, regardless of whether you're a fresher or an experienced one. And a very good description of it is by one designer that I found on Twitter. Is essentially they stated that there are three parameters that they look at. One is the problem challenging enough and it drives them enough to work on it. Second is compensation, or basically cost of living, like how well does it cover their cost of living and how much on top of it does it go. And the third one is basically the people who are involved in that. And if it meets all three criterias, then that's amazing. You should definitely join. If you meet two of the criterias, you take a shot at it and be there as long as it continues to meet both of your criterias. As soon as one of those criterias goes away and the only one remains, you leave and move to a next one. So if you're looking at if an offer on a company where the compensation is a little lower, but the opportunity to learn is much higher as compared to some other organization which may pay you a lot more at that point of time, obviously this would be dependent on the situation that you're in. If, for example, like for whatever reason, the compensation is really important to you right now, as opposed to maybe somewhere down the line in future it may not be. So depending on your financial situation, the decision can vary. But it's okay to take a little less if the other two attributes that I mentioned work really well for you. Because what happens in a lot of, so uh, I'll give you my personal example only. The first job that I had started off, I knew a lot of people who made a lot more money at that point of time as a fresher in different companies. And in a year of working there and the amount that I learned, when I moved to Flipkart, I approximately got like a 3.5 times jump of what I used to make before. So the corrections do happen. It's not really that if you start very high and that's going to continue for a long period of time. It's basically what you want to focus on at that point of time. If comp is the one that's really important at this instance, then you should be okay to reject an offer based on that.
And we are not saying you to, right? The idea is
Huh.
not to tell you
You
what to
should
do. It depends on your exact situation. We
you
gave
should
you a,
evaluate
yeah.
if it works best for you. If the others are okay enough for you to see, and you see opportunity in that organization to learn and grow to be able to demand much better offers in the future, then you should take that route. If you see that you'll not learn a lot there and the comp is also low, then please don't go there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I hope that this answers your question. More so, a framework to for you to evaluate if the offer is good for you or not. And with that being said, it really depends on if you really need the money right now, or what is that you're looking at, like in that experience. And if you are starting as a fresher, one thing that definitely you should have an eye on is how much you can grow and learn in that particular organization, more than anything else. Let's take a question from Rohit, and he has asked a slightly different question, but let me ask you this. So, let's suppose if I have to apply to a Flipkart or a Myntra today as a
Mhm.
fresher, what kind of case studies should I have in my portfolio?
it's it is great if you have something related to the domain that the company works on. It's not necessary, but what you should be focused on is that if you're doing a portfolio case study that's related to e-commerce, it should be something that e-commerce companies are currently struggling with. If it's a problem that these companies have already solved, but you are just showing a different take on it, and it may be good, it may not be good. Some people are open to take those suggestions, some people are not. So it's, if you're doing a case study based on the what the company is actually doing, you'll have to put a lot more effort in identifying that problem area a lot more. Because what happens is these people obviously know a lot more in depth on the problem space that exists. A lot of it is not visible from the outside. So if you can identify something from the outside, that really puts you in a great position. But you'll have to put a lot more effort to find those things out. Otherwise, it shouldn't make a lot of a difference whether your case study is in the same domain as the company, as long as the relevant skills are being showcased.
Yeah, I do agree with what you're saying. In the end, it's a skill that you have, and that matters. And having a case study in that domain really helps. but it's not the end of the world. People
Yeah,
do make a
because
transition.
what most companies understand really well is that you can only know so much about how that industry operates while being from the outside. So it doesn't really matter that much of how much experience you have, and sometimes that experience is quite detrimental as well. So if I have, let's say, worked in e-commerce exclusively for the past 10 years, and there's another e-commerce company that's trying to come up and they're trying to do some things differently, I will not be an ideal candidate for them, because I am very much fixed in my ways of understanding how e-commerce works, and the company is trying to do something different. They're obviously trying to challenge the way in which the industry operates. They would very much want people who are not very invested or tied down by the ways of how the industry operates, because it holds you back. You develop certain attributes that you would always associate, saying ki, nahi, this did not work there, this did not work there, so why should we do this? So obviously then you're not an ideal candidate for that company, because your experience in that field is detrimental to what the organization wants to do.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with this. Um, okay, so this is a question that I think will help clear a lot of myths, and that's why let's take this one. So Kiran is asking, do you need to speak English well to be a good UX designer? My English level is medium to low.
Mm, doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. If it basically would depend a lot on the organization also that you're applying for. So if you're good in Hindi and a lot of people inside your company are also comfortable with Hindi, and you are very much capable of like bringing your ideas forward in that, then it should work really well for you in the beginning. Obviously, learning a common language would help going forward a little bit, and you can obviously keep working on that as you go. It's not a requirement per se. I have known friends, not designer friends, but engineering friends who had no, who basically a batchmate of mine who came from a village had really bad English at that point of time. And he ended up with the highest placement package in the entire batch. Didn't really matter how well he could speak with his colleagues, it mattered on the job that he could get done. And we were nowhere close to what he could do.
Hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so Neil, now coming from I think last second question from coming from a very recruiter side of things, right? Like
Hmm.
when we are trying to hire people for our team, what do you think the future of hiring is given the hybrid model of people working from office, people working from home? So what do you think is the future of design hiring per se?
So, and it's a very broad question, to be very honest. But what this remote hybrid era has done is basically opened up a lot of gates in terms of the opportunities that you can apply for. Already seen a lot of companies based out of US and Europe start reaching out to people here, and that's a really good thing. But it only means that you'll have to put in a lot more work than you're currently doing, because obviously if you look at these companies, their bars or bar of hiring might be even higher, and you would also have to unlearn certain things that you've been used to, since if it's a multicultural organization that you're applying for, so it some of the ways in which we work, or which is like a non work manner, the ways we behave is going to be important a lot more there, because then you'll have to find a common ground. In here, that common ground already exists. So it would become a very good opportunity for a lot of people, and it's still a little difficult to nail down, where every company cannot go the route where they're hiring from all of the different countries. It basically depends on where the organization is at, because there's still a lot of paperwork involved in hiring from different countries and getting that right in terms of both time zones and how the companies work. with employees being in different time zones, as well as how the compensation structure would work, so that nobody really feels that they are at a disadvantage because of where they are placed at. So it's interesting, it's evolving. I've seen a lot of companies take different approaches to this, but it would be interesting to see where this leads. I'm more than well, I personally find it a lot more refreshing that I can work from anywhere. But obviously, it does work well for some people, but may not work well for some others who are more and more involved in an in-person environment. So then that's what a lot of companies are also trying to figure out, as to like, how do we create a balance amongst this, where you can offer people the flexibility to work from wherever you want, while also looking after people who would want to work together sometimes. That continues to be a challenge today.
Yeah, and as everyone is not building a company like Basecamp, I think having an in-person connection with people really helps. So Neil, last question for you, and rather a simple one. So what are a few books that you would suggest to someone who is trying to break into get a job in design right now? So a few books that you would suggest to them.
Uh, I, I have not read a book which will help you get a job per se, so I won't really recommend any. If you're focused on specific skills, and especially if you're like a beginner, I would want you to start with thinking with type, because I have always said that in order to become a good visual designer, you should have better understanding of how the basics operate, and not focus a lot more on copying things. It's And I'm perfectly okay with you learning by copying work that other people have done. It is not an approach I prefer, because what that process teaches you is to recreate things. And like, you still take a long time to get to a stage where you develop an eye to actually start mixing those styles and try to create something new. If you start with the basics, it's it becomes it while it takes a lot of time to get better at those things, once you do it, like, sky's the limit at that point in time. So focus more on those attributes as well. There's a very interesting exercise that I had come across, which I tell a lot of people. If you follow Chris Do's Future Academy, they have a program for type design there, and it's basically a typography course that goes around for almost a month. The exercise that they provide in that class is that they would establish certain restrictions, give you a piece of information, and then you have to represent that information within those restrictions. And the restrictions are pretty interesting. You can only use type. The restriction could be that you can only use one font, one style, one font size. Now you figure out how to communicate the same hierarchy with that limitation. They'll keep changing those limitations to help you understand how within those constraints you can still do the job. Because a lot of times when you're exploring, you don't really consider those constraints. So when those constraints are put on you, you have no idea what to do.
So I would have gone for some book suggestions, but thank you so much for sharing
I
that.
think thinking with type is a good one to
Thinking with
start
type.
with.
Yeah.
If like I think design of everyday things is something that everyone has read, but
I
few
don't think
people
everyone has, but
few people
this
really
is,
understand. So even
yeah,
while a lot of things that you would read in that book may seem very obvious, it takes a long time to actually internalize those things.
yeah.
So it's for a lot of design books. And there's another one. There's thinking with type, and there's another one for color. The name I'm forgetting, but that is also a great book. It what The thing I love about that book is essentially it helps you understand that color is always seen in context of the surrounding that it is present in. And when you
Mhm.
start seeing it in that way, then the color rules that you study, like analogous, complementary, and those are things, they don't really matter so much at that point in time when you learn to understand those principles and be aware of the environment that a certain object that you're designing is going to be put in. So very simple example that they said is white is actually never white.
Hmm.
It, based on the material property that has been given to it, it would blend into that environment it was put in. If it's against white light, the object would be white. If it's against yellow light, the object would be yellow. So
Yeah.
that would certainly change the mood of the entire thing. So it may not always be the best choice. It depends on what mood you're trying to create, and rules will not really help you too much there.
Absolutely. I do agree with the, the basic idea that you're trying to communicate is try going for the specific skills, and that might help you more than going for a book that teaches you how to get a job and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we would have ended here, but I think one question got repeated twice or thrice in the chat. So let me ask you this last question. So, whenever you look at a job post,
Hmm.
more often than not, it has a minimum 2 years experience, requirement. Should you apply for that job as a fresher or not?
Yes, you should.
Okay, so guys, as easy as it gets, you should, and
See,
I do. Yeah.
I would clear this out a little bit. If all of the other requirements that they have mentioned in that posting is met by you, then the year criteria is not a hard cap. The year criteria is usually put to cut down the noise. So if I say that I am hiring for, let's say, 0 to 2 years, so you get a, but I would prefer people with some experience or some better understanding of the skill set that I'm looking for. And what ends up happening is I get like 50 applications from people who have done this work for like 1 year, 1 year and a half year, and thousands of applications with 0 years of experience. So I end up with a lot more applications that I can go through to find the right person. So that's why it's I don't say it's the right thing to do, but it's usually done for this specific reason. That years of experience is never really a hard cap. You'll also find that since a lot of career growth is non-linear, so it may not always work that way as well. So if a company says that the senior designer requires 8 years of experience, but there are a lot of senior designers that exist with only 2 to 3 years of experience,
Yeah.
so that may change depending on how they see that role. But it's not real. If you think you can do the job, apply for it. The worst that will happen is that you'll not hear a call back, which doesn't really change anything. You can keep applying.
Yeah, and as the saying goes, if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Yeah.
And I think on that note, we would want to wrap the session up. Thank you so much, Neil, for doing this. I think the answers were really helpful. Very strong opinions at places, and that's what I expect from you. I really expect, you. I hope to see your, hair changing color very soon, and see you in person in Bangalore or in Delhi whenever you are around. And let's do it again sometime soon, man. People enjoyed it.
Sure.
I think a lot of answers, and it was helpful. Thank you so much, Neil.
Anytime.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much for staying till the end of the session. We have a very special announcement for you. And it's basically, if you remember, last year we did something, a fundraiser called Breathing Design Conference. And just to share some highlight, it was our flagship design conference attended by over 300 designers. 20 plus design leaders came, shared their knowledge. There were talk sessions, panel discussions, and things like that. And apart from all the learning, networking, and growth that we all experienced, we were able to raise more than 3 lakh rupees by just a ticket size of 400 99 or something like that. And all the donation went to NGOs like Feeding India, Hemkund Foundation, and many such more. And you can check out the donations and everything at oxygen.designsundays.in if you want to. Based on the epic response we got last year, we are back with Breathing Design Conference Season 2, and it's on 19th and 20th of Feb. We'll try to get the best of the speakers this time. Also, we will have 30 plus session speakers and more. So we are trying to close as we speak. It's going to be at least 10x better with more speakers, better sessions, networking sessions, and so much fun. Since you have with us today, I'm super excited to talk about, the ticket value is 1,999 this time. They will go for 599 or 699 to people, most people. But since you are here, I'm going to give you one chance to get it for 499 as early bird discount. So you can get your tickets today at the lowest price. More than 20 people have already paid 599 for the tickets, and you are going to get even discounted price for this. And this is a launch only offer. If you miss it today, or rather in next 1 hour, you're not going to get it. It's going to be an amazing, it's a festival, it's not just a conference. You are going to enjoy there are tons of bonuses on top of everything that you are getting. So grab it now, only valid for next 1 hour. And I would love to see you all at the conference. And I've just pasted the link in the chat as well if you guys are interested, and you can find it in the description after the live stream ends. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and I am super excited to see you all in the conference. There are going to be tons of learning, tons of networking. You'll be able to see around 500 designers to network with. You can ask your specific questions and have lots of fun. On that note, thank you so very much for joining. And next weekend, next Sunday, we are bringing Felix from ADP List. He's the founder of ADP List, and he'll be here asking, answering questions around UX design mentorship and how can you make the most out of UX mentorship. On that note, it's your host, Rohan, signing off.